Welcome to Northwest Aerospace News Live. I am Jennifer Ferrero, a writer for the magazine and your host. Thank you to our sponsor, Aerospace Vendors. In today's episode, we talk with Alyssa Carson, an amazing young woman with a lifelong goal of becoming an astronaut and going to Mars. We'll find out what has motivated her to achieve a high level of education and how she is internationally impacting space travel, aerospace, and more for women and girls. Let's welcome today's guest, Alyssa. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming to the show. We're very excited to have you today. Well, Alyssa, I interviewed you about a year ago in our sister publication, Let's Go Aerospace. And I was astounded to learn about your accomplishments and dream of going to Mars. Many companies are working on space travel vehicles, satellites, and other space development activities here in Washington State and in the Northwest. Please tell us about your big picture future goals and why they are important to you.
Yeah, for me, I've always been interested in space and I've always had a passion for the space industry. And yeah, I think just big goals for me is I was fascinated when I was younger, and just the more I learned about the space industry, the more involved I wanted to be. And I knew that one day I wanted to work and contribute to all of the amazing work that was going on in the space industry. So yeah, I mean, really big goals is just contributing to the space industry, keeping up with all of the future adventures, and hopefully being able to support and one day see people go to Mars and continue our human need of exploration.
Well, tell me, what kind of education and training have you gone through to reach these goals?
Yeah, so I got my undergrad, my bachelor's degree in astrobiology, and I'm currently working on a PhD in space and planetary science. And really, just kind of building that backbone of education and experiences to essentially apply one day for the astronaut selection process. But as far as different like trainings, there's no set requirements for something like an astronaut selection process. And so I was always just looking for any and all things that I thought would relate to the space industry, would be important in the space industry. So I got my pilot's license and was able to learn a lot of those skills, and especially multitasking. I was able to do water survival. I've done some microgravity flights, and then continuing to seek more and more opportunity and continue to build that resume, that of just anything that would relate to the space industry.
I have a follow-up question for you, because I believe you said you've been to space camp a number of times, and I think this is probably of interest for the youth in our audience. How many times have you gone to space camp, or a derivation of a space camp?
Yeah, I went to space camp a whole bunch when I was younger and first learning about space. Space camp was like the perfect place. I kind of considered it my version of Disney World. So I would try to go every year. So I went around 15 times, just all throughout my childhood, to the space camp in Huntsville, Alabama, and some other camps as well. But yeah, I was just always looking for these opportunities because that's where I was learning like most of my information as a kid.
It's also interesting, just as a follow-up, I know that you're studying astrobiology now for your PhD. How did you choose that field over, say, engineering, mechanical engineering, or some other version of something that you'd need to know in space?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are so many different types of career paths that you could go into to one day work in the space industry. And so I was, when I was younger, I was researching into all sorts of different types of career paths and trying to figure out what skill sets related the most to me and what I thought I would be the best at, and also what I was most interested in. And I eventually landed on astrobiology. There's a whole lot of experimental research. So like, for example, right now I experiment with different types of bacteria in Mars-like conditions to see how they grow or if they grow in those conditions. And that experimental work was really important to me because I really wanted some sort of hands-on research as part of the work that I was doing. And some of those other career paths didn't quite have that same kind of experimental research that I was looking for. And I'm happy I found that in astrobiology. Astrobiology is such a interdisciplinary field where you are able to learn about all the different sciences and how they apply to space. So it's really perfect to learn about the variety of different research and science that goes on within the space industry.
Hmm. Well, that's pretty cool, and I imagine there's a lot of young women and men too who are in school and can benefit from hearing about this and your dedication. So now it appears that you are now speaking internationally. You are influencing young girls and women and others in the aerospace and space industries. Tell us about your travel and speaking engagements.
Yeah, speaking, that was something that I didn't originally anticipate when I first started going after my own personal dreams. But, it kind of was pretty obvious pretty early on, like how disconnected the general public was from the space industry. And also just how much opportunity there is in the space industry that wasn't getting relayed down to the next generation. And I think that that's something that is, yeah, just missed out on. I think that so many people have the opportunity to work in the space industry, but they either get scared away by math and science. And, there's plenty of career paths within the space industry that has nothing to do with math and science. And there's, so many opportunities for people to get involved. And I always say, it doesn't really matter what you like, but you can connect it to the space industry in some type of way. So, kind of seeing some of those gaps, I really wanted to be able to speak and share with people what was going on in the space industry, how to get involved, because a lot of the times it feels like something that is so disconnected from us, and just really encouraging the next generation to follow their own dreams. I know that for me, growing up and having a big goal of one day potentially becoming an astronaut, or, whatever my future would lead to, that was a very big goal. And a lot of the time it gets scary to go after those big goals. So really just helping support that next generation to follow whatever their goals may be as well.
Well, that's really encouraging. And yes, I would echo your sentiment. Anytime you can write and also speak well, and in your case, maybe serve as a public relation arm a little bit for the space industry, for space travel, then that is a good thing. Well, tell me, what will it take for the United States to send astronauts to Mars, and what happens before we get there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of steps in place right now. I think there's a lot of progress being made towards, hopefully sending people to Mars one day. There is obviously the new Artemis program and the new SLS rocket. So the second Artemis launch is currently tentatively set for this year, but, kind of keeping an eye on that. And that will actually have humans on it. So we'll have our first crewed mission with the Artemis program, and they'll be going to the moon, but not landing. And then hopefully the mission after we'll have people headed back to the moon. And a lot of this really is just testing this new technology, getting a better idea, obviously getting back into going other places in the solar system. So I think that's all really exciting. And I think once we progress, because the ultimate goal is to have some sort of permanent presence on the moon by 2028. And once we get to that point, I think then we're really able to start turning our sights to Mars. And, obviously there's a lot of technology that still needs to, get refined. And we really want to make sure that everything is as perfect as it can be for sending, people on such a long trip. So I think, yeah, it's just continuing to, make that technology even better and make sure that we're doing everything in the best way.
If I might ask a follow-up, and I think I asked you this when I interviewed you before, and that is, just going to Mars, for example, it's pretty far away. You'll have to tell me, how far and how long it takes to get there. But I think you said to me at that time, they won't send people to Mars until they're really ready to send, until they have it all figured out. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Going to Mars is not a small feat. And I think that, yeah, everyone in the space industry is really aware of what a challenge it can be. And actually getting people there, them staying there and then coming back, there's a lot of components and a lot of factors to that. And so I think that with that, it is really important to consider every stage of the mission, every part of the mission. And, NASA has always had a goal of, sending people to space getting a job accomplished, and then bringing them home safely. And I don't think that we'll see that mission to Mars until we're in a place to do that successfully.
Great. Well, I'm sure your family is happy to hear that. Now, when you do get to Mars someday, hopefully you will be there. What will your role be on Mars?
Yeah, so a lot of the, I guess, educational background and just materials that I've been particularly focused on has really just been potential life on Mars. Obviously, there's water on Mars, so there's always a conversation about life when there's water. So, really, just learning more about the water that's on Mars, learning more about the soil and materials that are there. Realistically, we want a better idea of the different materials on Mars and what the potential or future for Mars is, right? So we have rovers that are currently collecting samples. Perseverance was a great addition to the slew of rovers that we've sent in the past, just because it has such a targeted mission of looking for that evidence of past water, that evidence of potential life. But sometimes those rovers, they take their time to complete their missions just because of how far away Mars is. But yeah, I think it's really just going to be a lot of figuring out, now that we're actually here on Mars, let's see what we're working with and see what the potential is with that.
Great. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we have a lot of manufacturers and space companies here in Washington even, and I'm wondering what planning for life on Mars looks like for NASA and some of these space-related manufacturers of vehicles, habitats, and other suppliers in the next, say, 10 years.
Yeah, I think that with the space industry, it is always a team effort, right? And I think that all those companies coming together, each one has a different component, especially with, the Artemis program. There's also a lot of work with the European Space Agency as well in different components. And I think that, yeah, it's really exciting to see even more collaboration grow within the space industry, and not only collaboration within these companies, but also internationally. And I think it's just a really great way to come together, and we're getting the best of the best really to make the parts that they are specialized in and working well in. And so yeah, I'm just really excited for so many people to be a part of something so big, and I'm really glad that space is really able to connect us and unify us in that way. So yeah, I think it's great. I'm really excited to see what each team and company and component of the different missions kind of bring in. I think it's so exciting to see it actually come together.
Well, it definitely is exciting, and it seems like it's been a long time coming for our worldwide economy and for others like you who are very interested in traveling to space. So, Alyssa, we're already at the end of our program. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd like to add is, just stay up to date. There's loads of exciting things happening within the space industry. There's so much opportunity no matter what you're interested in. There's always new photos from James Webb or the human side of things, no matter what it is. Yeah, just find something that really relates to you, and you can definitely keep in the know. And yeah, there's so much exciting things to come. So I hope that that shared excitement will get carried on to all of you as well.
Real quick, then, you also wrote 2 books, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I have some books to help the next generation, young kids get interested, and then also started on working towards their dreams. So obviously it relates back to my story, which is fairly space related, but in general, it's like workbook pages and ways to get yourself started towards your own personal dreams and goals. So I highly recommend that you can look for it on Amazon or directly through D'Angelo Publishing as well. But yeah, it's a great starter if you have a young one that has big goals.
Well, that is just great. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Alyssa.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Well, if you want to learn more about Alyssa, you can order her books on Amazon, and you can visit her website at nasablueberry.com. Thank you again to our sponsor, Aerospace Vendors. Until next time, keep engaging with the aerospace manufacturing news you need to know with Northwest Aerospace News Magazine. Goodbye.